Can you hear me, Abdul?
Yeah, I can hear you and see you. So thank you, Gautier, for joining us. Okay, so let me give you a quick introduction.
I think you're on mute, Abdul.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Yeah. Gautier has 18 plus years of experience in consulting, corporate roles, and analytics. Okay, so in the EMEA region, he specialized in strategic support, program management, financial planning, process design. He has expertise in implementing finance, digital, and data systems, building high-performance teams to drive business growth. Gautier, over to you. I think today we are talking very interesting topic about driving value and productivity from digital and data factory. We talk about more about many things, but these are the things which we rarely hear. So I'm
can
very
you see my
happy
screen,
that
Abdul?
we can see your screen. I'm very happy that
Perfect.
about this very interesting topic. Very few presentations around. So I really like to enjoy your discussion. Yeah, over to you, Gautier. Please take it up.
Yes, thank you, Abdul. Hello, everybody. So I'm really happy to be here today to talk about this initiative. Actually, there is a connection with the presentation before from Mark. The presentation of Mark was more around the overall strategy and how to really position it for success. On my side, I'm going to deep dive more into the digital and the data aspect, which is my area of specialty, and how to get value from your digital and data factory. So in a nutshell, as you explained, Abdul, so I'm bringing 20 years of experience, 50% in corporate, 50% in consulting. So in corporate, I spent 10 years at PayPal running finance and data teams. And in consulting, I worked for big consulting firms like A&M, Capgemini, and I also work as an independent consultant, delivering projects for PEs, large corporates, or scale-ups. So I do, let's say, 3 types of projects. I do like a strategy, especially when it comes to data and digital. I do projects around performance improvement. And then I also run, interim management assignments. So here I provided some of the clients with which I'm working, a lot of French clients and international clients as well, carrying in the luxury sector. Fnac Darty, that is like our retail leader here in France, insurance companies. Right now I'm working on for a media company. So I have, let's say, a broad expertise, let's say, with a focus on financial services and payments, having spent close to 10 years at PayPal. So why did I select this topic? The thing is that myself, I've seen this evolution in the last 15 years. First, I was in a tech company, PayPal, so really ahead of the game when it comes to digital, right? And of course, like all the traditional companies in their sectors have seen some new competitors, let's say, emerging. And, since the last 10 to 15 years, they have tried to catch up. We see that in, media companies trying to compete with Netflix. We see that in transformation companies fighting with Uber. We see that in e-commerce companies trying to fight with Amazon. We see that basically in all the sectors where I've been operating, because you have those new tech entrants that are really eating the lunch of the established players. So as a consequence, what traditional companies have done is that they have invested significantly in digital and data, and that's not a new trend, and that's something that has been happening for the last 10 to 15 years, right? And many often, they have gone through like this cycle of building a digital and data factory, spending a lot of money with strategic consulting firms to build the transformation journey. And then what I see also as an operational consultant is that very often the result is, let's say, a bit disappointing. Here I'm giving this data point of 85% of the data science projects failing, but that's what I see, consistently across the board for all those companies, that they do see value, they do see some success. Nevertheless, often they have really some question marks on the effectiveness of their internal digital factory. It's getting a lot of investment. Often, the rest of the business is really constrained from a budget perspective to, let's say, fund this new unit. But often this unit is challenged, and at a certain point of time, we see that those units end up being, let's say, internalized because they are not, let's say, meeting the initial expectation. And basically, this question of, let's say, analyzing the productivity of the digital team, of the data team. So that's very true for the traditional players, but that's also true for the tech companies that now also have some productivity challenges. When I was at PayPal 15 years ago, it was all about tracking the revenue growth and the business activity with year-over-year growth rate higher than 20-25%. Now they have some challenges, especially post-COVID. They need to find some savings, and this productivity play applies now across the board. And I think the challenge is that, let's say, the traditional approaches that consulting have do not work with those units because those are new roles, those are new processes, new ways of working. And therefore, the usual way of, let's say, measuring success, measuring productivity has changed. So here, what I'm going to cover in this session is really some tips in terms of how you can analyze and how you can improve the effectiveness of your digital and data units. And concretely, I was saying that I've been facing this type of questions in my personal experience, and those are concrete examples of projects that I've led really related to this exact question. So the first example, a digital factory created for an e-commerce player 5 years ago, lot of investment, but basically the board was concerned with the return of investment and the value creation. So that's an example of assignment I did 2 years ago. Consumer good leader engaged in centralization of its tech and data teams. So here it's another concrete example I handled last year with, again, this traditional company investing a lot in digital, but realizing that they were really spending a lot compared to their to its competitors, and also realizing that the spend was really fragmented. So therefore, I worked with them to really centralize and operationalize the tech and data teams. And then the last example in financial services. So here it was a big bank competing with fintech players, and for instance, TransferWise. TransferWise, has really disrupted the FX market in Europe and also overseas. When you need to send money, to other geographies, the experience and the value proposition of TransferWise is extremely compelling, and therefore eating the lunch of the traditional banks. And here I helped this bank in the launch of a competitor, also setting up, let's say, the operating model for data and technology. So those are examples I personally handled. So now what can be, let's say, the toolkit if you need to audit and evaluate the value of your data and digital strategy. So how to proceed? So here I'm providing with a few, let's say, ingredients. So first of all, I think what is important to acknowledge is that it's an equation with multiple parameters. Right? because what I'm seeing in those projects is that I have to analyze those, let's say, 8 axes. First of all, it's really important to be clear around the purpose, the strategy. I think it's really important to align the stakeholders in terms of, okay, what you want to achieve. You really want to rally the organization against that purpose. You don't want, let's say, just a number. You do want this purpose, and I think it's really aligned with what Mark was explaining before. So building this purpose, building this strategy, not only for digital and data, but for the entire company is key, because ultimately you don't want a standalone digital team. You want a digital team as a business lever. So you need to start really with the business, start with the executive team, understand their challenges, and then build an organization that is really aligned to their needs. So that for me, that's extremely important to have that connection. What I'm seeing across the board is that the demand management is extremely important, because those units are always creating some frustration. That's normal. That's part of the game. If there is no frustration, it means that basically you're spending too much, because if you deliver like all the projects, all the products that are asked by the business, well, you end up with a monster, right? So organizing this demand management, ensuring that you're aligned with the business needs, and ensuring you have a way to prioritize based on the value. For me, it's one of the top, expectation. That's really like a key success factor. Obviously, you have the ways of working and the delivery approach. And as a consultant, that's really one area that you can easily audit. And what I'm seeing is that with Agile, also now what's happening is that you have multiple ways of working in organization, and multiple teams. Each team has its own way of working, and therefore resulting in complexities, especially for, let's say, transversal projects. Number 4, the performance management framework. So here, I think companies that are very advanced, they do have this governance team that is able to evaluate the spend, the value when it comes to leading indicator of success and also lagging indicator of success. And that part is very important, because those digital teams, they have some, let's say, shareholders, because they are spending a lot of money, and they need to be able to, like as a startup, to report to the investors like every quarter, every month, every week about, let's say, the success. And then if you don't have that, then basically you're blind, because you're not able to evaluate the spend that you're spending, and then you're not able to show the value that you're delivering. So the performance management framework and how it's implemented is a key dimension. Obviously, the technology is very important, but often it's the only point. When you say, okay, I'm going to audit the digital and data unit, I'm going to only look at technology. And for me, technology, it's one enabler, but it's not the only element. Very often also with tech profiles, the risk is that you do, let's say, a lot of, let's say, tech for tech product, tech for tech projects. It can end up representing a very significant amount of money. And for me, technology is an enabler. So at some point, very often you don't really care about, the exact brick, the exact stack, because, they can really offer the similar services, but it's really what you do with the technology and how it can serve as an enabler. Obviously, the people, so the skills and the talents. And here, from an HR perspective, that's something that can be difficult to evaluate, because the job titles, the skill set is always evolving. So you need to have, let's say, a matrix in place to be able to see, what is your talent map, and whereas you have some gaps or not. Those units are not, let's say, isolated. So you need to understand their ecosystem in terms of technology and in terms of partners. And you need to understand the overall, company governance and culture, to see how the organization is basically sticking to the company values. So that's a bit of an introduction to say, okay, those are the lenses that you want to analyze. And in the rest of this presentation, I'm going to double click into some of those aspects. So basically, to build the purpose, to build the strategy, myself, I have, let's say, my own methodology. So I use some ingredients. The first element that I like doing is to collect, the pain points. So doing some interviews with the organization, hearing from people about, what's not working well and getting some data points is an interesting way to build your strategy, because basically you will be able to connect your priorities, your initiatives with some concrete pain points. So doing those interviews, collecting those pain points, classifying those pain points, for me, it's a starting point. As part of those workshops, often I also ask about the new capabilities that are asked by the team. So here, I end up with a laundry list, a long list of capabilities, but those are ingredients because those are asks from the business. Obviously, I need to have also the quantitative part as well. So I analyze the key metrics to have some facts about the current organization, the productivity, the business performance. But it's important to get all those metrics. I like also doing some interviews, and typically when it's possible with customers, to hear from customers directly about direct issues. Obviously, you can do some surveys to do that, and it's a bit faster. But I think the advantage of the interviews is that you get some very concrete, stories, and it can really give you some good hypotheses when it comes to building your overall strategy. Then to connect the dots with the overall organization, the overall company, I tend to do value chain analysis. So because the value chain differs from one actor to the other, so I like positioning the building blocks of the companies, and then to see on which concrete building blocks the digital or the data team will actually have an impact. Because the risk is that you do initiatives, data for data, tech for tech, that are not delivering any value, right? So having a clear view of, okay, in which part your initiative is going to have an impact is a good way to connect the dots between what you're trying to achieve and the company context. And obviously, we are smart, but our competitors sometimes are smarter. So it's very important to look at the external world to see what other similar actors, let's say, are doing. So with that, it's allowing me and allowing the company to build the purpose, to build the vision, right? That then you want to instrument by streams. So if I think about data, it can be, data engineering, data management, data science. So you will have, let's say, your different streams. You will have your enablers, because often you need to be clear about the resources that you need, right? So the splitting the vision by stream and by enabler is a key point when you want to operationalize your strategy. You will have a phasing, because you won't be able to do, like, let's say, everything in year one. And obviously you will want to position some quick wins rapidly to secure the buy-in from your internal stakeholders. And then you will connect the dots with a business case, again with some tangible impact from the team. Right. So this is how I tend to build this strategy. Here I'm double clicking on one aspect, which is benchmarking, because when it comes to analyzing the performance of a unit, as a consultant, what is very effective is to bring some points of comparison. It's not going to give the full story, because there are always elements that you have to take into account. It's not it's never like a black and white story. Nevertheless, bringing some benchmark and saying to the CEO, okay, this is the size of your team, those are the key metrics, and this is, let's say, a comparison point, a data point from a list of similar actors is an easy way to visualize, okay, what is, let's say, the size of the price, meaning it's a way to identify where there is a potential gap. And here the challenge with digital and data is that it's a new domain. So therefore, a lot of the benchmark metrics do not exist. You have some benchmarking companies, APQC, other actors, Gartner, that do provide some data points, but often it's not really connected to digital factories, data factories. So that's where you need to find the right metrics. You need to find some metrics that are very relevant in terms of, velocity, in terms of time to market, in terms of availability of the systems, in terms of number of, let's say, critical bugs, to be able to challenge, let's say, the ASI. So building this external benchmark and doing that with intelligence, because it's not the same thing to be in luxury, in retail, in consumer good, is also a very important ingredient as you want to measure the productivity of your digital team. So here I'm providing some example. Of course, it's more, let's say, for the illustration, but that's something that is very, very effective. And obviously, you will start with the high-level view, the percentage of spend, the number of resources as a percentage of the size of the organization, and then you will double-click in some more granular metrics. Then something that is also very effective in my experience for this type of project is to build some sort of due diligence-like analysis. So due diligence, that's what's happening when you purchase a company, you do a strategic due diligence, often an operational due diligence to identify the pockets for value creation. Well, that's something that you can do as well with a digital unit. The only point is that the metrics are going to change. You're not going to look at the P&L. You're not going to look at only like the org chart. You're going to look at different metrics. So here again, that's an illustration. You see, I have the value, what's coming out of this unit. What are the performance metrics in terms of velocity, productivity, predictability? Here, the good thing is that with Agile, you're able to measure everything. Often those metrics are not leveraged, so that's the opportunity to double click into that. Obviously, you have also the quality, right? The percentage of tests that are, let's say, automated, the number of significant bugs, the patch ratio, right? So those quality metrics are also a way to inform your diagnosis. Some metrics around the platform performance, especially when it comes to traditional actors, having a view of the technical depth. And then on the right-hand side are the people and skill metrics. So here, that's a view of the metric that you need to analyze, that you can analyze. And then obviously you will want to have points of comparison, the benchmark, and you will want to look, let's say, the evolution to see if, for example, today, 2025, you've seen a positive evolution versus 2022, 2021. And obviously, a key area, that's what you have on the left, because often, people are not able to translate easily what is the concrete value that is generated by the digital team. And that's the area where you need to be fact-based, ideally have a P&L impact, but show the evolution in terms of flagship project, in terms of NPS, in terms of conversion rate. But it's important to have those metrics, because if there is no metric, if we are not able to demonstrate the value, then it's going to be very difficult to sustain the investment. So often you have some friction in the processes. It's normal. And here, one methodology to understand those points of friction is really to take into account the end-to-end life cycle of a digital product, from ideation to delivery and communication. So here, basically, based on your first assessment, you will be able to identify the pain points, the challenges. So you will have a first mapping of, okay, what's not working. Then the second step will be to do some hypothesis on the root cause. And that's where you need to take a bit of insight. And finally, of course, to make it actionable, you will build some recommendation on remediation aspects. So that's working very well when you do it end-to-end. And here I'm providing one example, a concrete example. So for example, with one client, we had a very low predictability rate with 50% of the user stories planned that were actually not delivered. So the digital factory was not meeting its expectation. So here our hypothesis is that too many projects were entering into the PI, which is the program increment process, without proper qualification. And our other hypothesis is that there was not a good tool to evaluate the complexity of the project, and therefore the team was over-promising and under-delivering. So here, what we put in place, for example, is a new framework to evaluate the complexity of the project with a proper business case. We also put in place a measurement of this metric, because this predictability, this 50%, that's something that we had calculated, but the number was actually not directly available. So as soon as you have this number, then you start measuring it and improving it. And then we also revisited the confidence criteria in terms of, okay, we said, okay, we have to be stricter in terms of what are the projects that really go from framing to deliver, right? And basically, we did the same exercise for all the pain points of the organization, and therefore for the management team, it was very helpful because they had all their pain points mapped on with this framework, and then they had, let's say, all the hypotheses and all the recommendations in 3 pages describing like the end-to-end problems of their units. What can be useful as well, here I'm providing a lot of tools, and then you can select what tool is effective in your context. If you have less time, because I think this step that I was showing is taking a lot of time, you need to do a lot of interviews. Here, if you want to operationalize, if you want to go a bit faster, then what you might want to do is to map the maturity of, let's say, your different units, let's say, based on the survey. So here it's more, let's say, a preparation that you can do. If you want to be very, very effective, and if you want to prepare the work, you can have this survey done, let's say, with your organization. And here you might want to assess the maturity of your processes on the different building blocks. And by the way, the building blocks will need to be adapted based on the organization. But here, I think the advantage of this matrix is that that's a way to identify early on what are, let's say, the areas where you will want to investigate further, because the task can be quite huge, and maybe you will want to identify, let's say, in advance what are, let's say, the areas that deserve, let's say, more attention. And basically, you will run a lot of analysis that I described before. You will do like a lot of interviews. You will analyze the metrics. You will talk to the customers, and then what I'm seeing often is that ultimately you end up, let's say, with a plan. And the plan is very granular, a bit technical, and difficult to digest for the CEO and for the teams, right? So here, I think what works well is really to have some concrete streams. So here you have 5 examples of streams, that you can connect with your purpose. Of course, that will vary depending on your context. Then you have your baseline, and the baseline, those are the points that you have documented through the due diligence. So for example, here I'm saying PI plan respected at 30%, it can be 50%, it can be a different number. And then you need to be clear about, okay, what success looks like in 1 year, in 3 years, it can be also in 3 months. And with that, let's say you will have some concrete outcomes that you will be able to monitor over time. So here, I'm completely in line with what Mark was explaining before, that the risk is having like a very long list of metrics. So here you have to be careful because it has to be really narrowed in terms of, okay, what are the areas that you will want to monitor. But basically, as part of the process, we have uncovered, let's say, issues. We have uncovered metrics, right? Number of outages, time to market, etc., etc. And basically, then you will want to plot those KPIs into your plan so that then the management knows how they will measure the outcome of the productivity plan. And to conclude, so what is the recipe for success for a digital factory? So here, if I step back, I have identified 5 ingredients. So the first one is to have some P&L ownership. I've seen a lot of digital units that were, let's say, dismantled because ultimately the head of the unit or the chief data officer was not owning any revenue number. I think if you want to have a successful unit, they need to have a direct impact on the business. They need to. It's much easier if they own their P&L. If they don't own their P&L, their contribution is likely to be very much challenged. If I come back to some of the example I provided, e-commerce, the head of the digital unit was managing e-commerce 25% of the revenues of this organization. So therefore, he has a seat at the table because he represents 25% of the sales. If the contribution is very indirect, then it's much more challenging to, at the end of the day, justify the value. So having a P&L ownership for me is critical. Then, in terms of skill set, I think it's important to have a right mix between, external and internals in terms of how you structure the team and also how you build the team. Because the risk often is to take only people from the outside because you want to attract those new skills, but then you have a disconnect with the culture and the business of the existing company. So I think it's a good choice to also onboard some people who know very well the company, who have a network, who understand the business, who understand the key challenges, and then maybe to upskill them in terms of tech skills. And if you have, let's say, a good group of, let's say, those people that are, let's say, internal, and then maybe some key hires that you get from the outside, then you can have a good mix. If you only have, let's say, people coming from internal, you will not have the right skill set and the right mindset. But if you only take people from the outside, it's likely that they will end up leaving the company after 2 or 3 years, and it's going to be, like, let's say, a failure. Third ingredient, a realistic business case. So again, in the fails that I've seen, often, you had a strategic consultant that came, did a business case, very aggressive. Okay, the resources were granted and there was some sponsorship. Year 1, okay, that's the first year. 2 years, year 2, you start the problems, there is some delay, you end up having a significant gap between, okay, what was in the business case and the reality. So you try to explain that, okay, things are a bit more challenging, etc., etc. And then year 3, the gap is confirmed, and then the initiative is killed. So I think it's important to have a realistic business case and do a significant investment because you don't want to do like a POC, you want to build something, but you need to be realistic in terms of resourcing. If I've seen a company that, for example, invested really too much in the very beginning, so the team was really creating its own workload because there were too much staff. Then the results were disappointing, and boom, it was closed. It happened twice. I've seen that twice. So I think it's better to start a bit smaller, build some success, get some trust, and then scale up. Right. Aspect number 4, you have to be obsessed with the value creation, with the impact on the value chain to avoid the tech for tech or the data for data trap. So I think for every single initiative, need to be challenging the team, saying, okay, is it going to add some value, right? Why are we doing this? What is going to be the outcome for marketing, for sales, for operations? It has to be an obsession. And often it's good to have someone, a governance unit, someone senior, experience, right? A bit like the deputy of this team, really waking up every morning, challenging the teams about the value creation. And finally, the last ingredient is the executive sponsorship. Ultimately, when you create this type of units, you will get a lot of internal, let's say, enemies. Maybe it's not enemy, but people who are going to be a bit jealous because the digital team, the data team is getting a lot of visibility, a lot of investment. You need, I think, having a very strong executive sponsor. It can be the CFO, it can be different. It really depends on the company DNA and organization. But it's important because when you will face some headwinds, having the support of someone very senior in the organization is going to be very helpful. At PayPal, for example, when I was at PayPal, the data team was reporting to the risk officer, who was very powerful in the organization. I gave this example of a retail actor. The digital team was sitting with operations. Operations is key in retail and e-commerce. But so having this sponsorship again is a success factor. So with that, it was my last slide. So I cannot see if there are, let's say, some comments or reactions. Maybe I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take comments or questions from the audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, please post your questions in the.
And maybe Abdul, you had some reactions as well.
Yeah. So I think it's very different way to look at strategy. Okay, and then especially you talk about fixing the KPIs, the performance. Okay, so can you give how to do it in a different kind of industries? Okay, so is it like a manufacturing, logistics, any other supply chain companies? So can you give some industry examples?
Yes, so here I'm really focusing on digital and data, right? And here what I'm saying is that the KPIs of a digital or a data team are, let's say, new, meaning because those teams were not existing 20 years ago. So that's why you need to be a bit creative in terms of how you build this, let's say, this due diligence. Then the metrics I provided work, let's say, for any industry, any sector, right? On my side, it's true that I've worked with financial services, consumer goods, luxury, retail, insurance. I've not done, let's say, that many assignments with industries. Maybe it will come later. But I think this framework can work, let's say, for every single company. And it's really about, okay, how you measure and document the value, how you look at the productivity, the performance, how you consider the quality, right? So there is no, let's say, industry lens. Where there is an important industry lens, it's the connection with the value chain for the value creation. Because if you think about a payment company, your data team, for example, will improve the decline rate, right? If you think about e-commerce, maybe it will improve the product catalog, the conversion rate. If you think about consumer good, maybe it's going to be the marketing effectiveness, right? So that's where I think it's more on the value that the KPIs are going to be very, very different. But then on the internal, let's say, productivity and performance and quality, then that's sector agnostic.
Yeah. So, now let us say if we want to do whatever the methodology you suggested. So for a typical organization of mid-size segment, okay, so what are the steps we need to take it up?
So it really depends on, let's say, the question and the context, because sometimes you get a question around, okay, I want to set up a digital unit. And in that case, it's more, let's say, a strategy and the operating model design. Then sometimes you will get a question around, okay, improving the productivity, right? And improving the value creation. So I think those are, let's say, two different type of questions. I think, on my side, what I think is very powerful on the latter, if you think about improving the productivity, is to run that diagnosis around the end-to-end process to understand where are the friction points and what are the remediation recommendations. And then to run the due diligence, because at the end of the day, my experience that in companies, people have opinions, they talk, etc., etc. And the last one who speaks tends to be right. But then as soon as you start providing some numbers, then, the discussion becomes a fact-based. And often those numbers do not exist. So for me, running this due diligence-like analysis, and it's not a long project, it's taking 2 to 3 weeks, is a very good way to make the conversation much more objective. Otherwise, you will have a lot of emotion, right? And you will have difficulties to align the stakeholders, right? So the due diligence approach, in my view, is very, very effective, and also effective from a cost perspective for a company, because you invest for a reduced amount of time, and you get a very good return out of the consultants that will build this due diligence for you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Very interesting topic. So driving success from your digital factory, that is very, very important. So how does that, now you have a generative AI and ChatGPT and others. So collecting the data, some samples are a little easier now. Okay. So how does that affect the overall engagement for your projects? Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I think for me, GenAI, it's a tool, but you need to really realize that, okay, you have processes, right? And then you can have some issues in those processes or areas of improvement in terms of productivity. And then you have some levers to address that. One lever is to simplify the organization, reorganize stuff, stop doing some things, and those levers are very, very effective, right? Then you can try to improve those processes with automation, with AI, with GenAI. But for me, I see that as a lever to improve a process. And indeed, what is interesting is that it's a new tool that was not existing before. But sometimes, it's much more effective to simply remove or simplify that process, because in companies, often you have a lot of processes that are too complex and not necessary. Then another lesson learned is that if you think about GenAI, or AI, you need to have the foundations in place. I have this example for an e-commerce player. They have a big problem in terms of e-commerce catalog. E-commerce catalog was not containing the key information. Therefore, the same product was appearing as a distinct product. For example, the same iPhone was 2 iPhones in their catalog. So they had they have built an AI product to actually enrich their product catalog. So great initiative, concrete business outcome. Nevertheless, the issue is that this enrichment, we were not able to, let's say, feed it back into the source system. So it's great to have GenAI and to have new tools available, but then you need to have a connection and integration with some of your legacy systems, and sometimes that's a barrier. But that's why for me, you really need to start with the value chain, with the concrete processes, to understand the concrete issues in plain English, and then based on that, you have some tools, you have a toolkit. GenAI, it's a new tool, and that's great because it's enabling new, let's say, solutions. But sometimes, the best solution is always like the simplification. If you have 3 teams doing the same thing, and if you reduce that to one single team, it's much more efficient than any GenAI initiative. And that's why, for me, I think you need to start with the business question and then technology as an enabler, rather than starting with the technology and say, I have GenAI. What could be the use cases? Often you have like a laundry list that is disconnected from the context. So it's better to start with the business question and then use technology as a lever.
Correct. You are perfectly correct. Yeah. I think that's a very interesting session. It's a very different and very interesting session.
Thank you, Abdul.
So any final thoughts if you'd like to share to conclude?
No, thank you. And obviously, I have not provided in the presentation my contact detail, but I think you have my contacts on LinkedIn. And if there is any follow-up question, I will be happy to chat offline.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation, Abdul.
Thank you, Gautier. Thank you very much, and have a great day.